Last year, a psychologist by the name of Timothy Wilson decided to do something terribly, terribly cruel to a group of people. These were students. These were also people who lived in the area, people who happened to travel there, and he caught them in a mall. And this is the very cruel thing he did. He forced them to sit in a room, having surrendered their cell phones and any other device, in a chair by themselves for 10 minutes with nothing else there. And then he asked them how they did. How was this? That was the entire study, just sitting by yourself without a cell phone. People were miserable. They hated him. They said this was the absolute worst experiment they had ever participated in. He got worse ratings in his many decades as a psychologist than he'd ever gotten in the past. So then he decided to switch things up a bit. He said, okay, I'm going to change the parameters of the study. Now you have an option. You can sit here doing nothing, or you can administer electric shocks to yourself. Lo and behold, over half the people started shocking themselves. One guy went so far as to shock himself 190 times within the scope of the study. And there were some gender differences. Men, for instance, over 2/3 of the men shocked themselves. Women were a little less likely to shock themselves, fewer than half did. But overall, people preferred the electric shocks to doing nothing. That's how painful the experience of nothing, the experience of boredom, actually was. So today, you guys are at a conference about big data, about lots of information, what happens when there's lots of stuff going on around you. What I want to talk about is nothingness, boredom, what you do when you're actually forced to sit by yourself and do nothing. And think about it for a second. When was the last time you actually did that? When was the last time that you actually spent 10 minutes alone with your thoughts, when it wasn't you trying to fall asleep or you in the shower? We really don't do that anymore. We've lost the knack for it. And that might be a very big problem in terms of how we think. One of the great philosophers of the 20th century, Bertrand Russell, explored boredom in his book, The Conquest of Happiness. And he tells us that a generation that cannot endure boredom will be a generation of small men, a generation in whom every creative impulse slowly withers, as if they were cut flowers in a vase. It's not a very good image, but it has a lot of truth. And today I want to tell you about why we need to pursue boredom, why we need to recapture boredom, why we need to include boredom as a good word, not a bad word, as an everyday part of our lives.